I'm back with part 2 of the Palette 2 setup and calibration. So last time we took a look at a couple settings on the Palette 2. We did an internal calibration, some splice tuning, we set up Canvas Hub, and then we started our calibration print on our Ender 3. And that's where we left off, and that's exactly where we're going to pick up. We're going to take a look at the print that came off the Ender 3, see if we need to do any tweaking to get the palette fine-tuned. We'll do a little larger print, and then we'll move to the Prusa Mk3 and get all that set up. So I've made you wait entirely too long already, so let's get right back into the video. Our keychain print is done, and it's actually looking pretty good. Let's take a look at the first layer. So the back of the keychain looks pretty good. The blue and the orange didn't bleed into each other, so that's a good sign. These are translucent type filaments, and this probably wasn't the best choice for this test, but the keychain looks okay. But let's take a look at the back of the wipe tower. Now it's kind of hard to tell on this one because it's translucent and you're seeing through to multiple layers, but what we should have really seen is less orange and more blue. What we're shooting for is about 70% of the second color and 30% of the first color. So the orange did overshoot quite a bit. But the print still did come out good. So the calibration needs a little bit of work, but we're in a good place. And when the print's complete, it's going to give you a few stats. You'll notice it says pings right there. I'm going to show you that more in the Canvas Hub here in just a second. But when the print's complete, you can go ahead and hit finish. Also something to note, when we set the Bowden tube length in the Canvas Hub, I told you that's how much is left after the print completes. So let's take this tube off. We probably have over 200 millimeters that didn't get extruded, so we can definitely shorten that some. But again, it's better to be safe than sorry when doing this because you have to have filament in the extruder to be able to push it out the hot end. Back to the Canvas Hub, if you go to the Palette 2 tab, you can see the stats from the last print, and we have pings and we have pongs. The ping and pong system is how the printer and the palette give feedback to each other to know where each of them are at during a print. The ping is how the printer tells the palette the percentage of the print that is complete. And the pong is pretty much the measurement of the buffer that allows the palette to compensate for any discrepancies in the drive of the printer. It's based off the scroll wheel and the limit switch in the buffer on the palette too. So this is how they negotiate for how much filament the printer needs, basically. As you do more prints and calibrations, these numbers will change, but they should get more accurate over time. So those stats were pretty good, but I want to run this keychain print again so I can show you some more of the features of the Palette 2 after the calibration. But this time I'm going to use silver and orange filament so it's a lot easier to see the transitions on the model. I also want to reduce that Bowden tube length a little bit so we don't have so much slack at the end of the print. We're just wasting filament at that point. So let's jump back into Canvas IO. We'll go to the menu, we'll go back to projects just so we can reload this project. The same keychain project. And you don't have to change these colors up, but you might as well so that the palette asks for the correct color. 1, we're going to change it to a silver color. 2, we'll leave it orange, but we're going to use a really bright orange. For these materials I'm going to use, I know them pretty well, so we're going to use just the default material settings. And I want to change that Bowden tube length, so I need to change the printer settings. So I can come back up here, go to Printer Profiles, our Ender 3 profile, I'm going to hit Edit, Edit Printer, and then the Extruder tab, let's take it down 150. We'll make it 750. And we'll hit Save. Back to our project, we'll hit the menu, Projects, Keychain. We've got our silver set, we should be ready to slice, and we can send it over to our Canvas Hub. And here's our hub for this video. It has been sent. We can go back to our Canvas Hub. You can see the files have been added right here in this tag. Now we're ready to go ahead and start our print. So we'll hit Start Print. The palette's going to initialize and start doing its thing. It's going to try to clear the output just in case there's something in there. The output has been cleared. Go ahead and hit Finish. It's going to start asking for the gray filament on Extruder 1. We'll feed that in. An orange filament on Extruder 2. And then it's going to start making filament. And this is the time I like to go preheat the printer. Back to Canvas, it's going to ask you to preheat. Do 215 and 60. So when we start preheating, I make sure the tube isn't hooked up to the printer because we don't want to feed filament into a printer that might already have some in there. And when it's fully preheated, that's when I come in and remove the excess filament from the last print. The filament has been made. Now it's time to load it into the extruder gears. Just like before, we want to pull out just enough out of the tube. You can hear the pallet making more filament to get it into these gears. So we'll slide it through our holder, set it just in the gears so it grasps it. We'll hit the next button over here on the pallet. It tells you to go ahead and clip on the tube. We'll clip our tube and our holder. Then we can hit the next button. And now we're offered this Smart Load button, since we've already calibrated once. Back to Canvas Hub, it's also available right here on your Canvas Hub. So when we did this manually during the calibration, we fed 438 millimeters of filament, but that's a pretty rough estimate considering we were doing it from the LCD. The pallet thinks we used somewhere around 426 to get to the nozzle, so we're going to trust the pallet. The Smart Load button will send a command to your printer to extrude that amount of filament as the pallet sees fit, and that should get you right down to the hot end where you need to be. This is a very handy feature they've recently added to the firmware versions. So if we hit Smart Load, we're going to start feeding filament. You can see the count is starting to go down rapidly. That is calculated by that encoder wheel. If you take a look at the pallet, the same thing is reflected on the screen. We're still extruding. You can see the progress on the Canvas Hub over here. If we go take a look at the printer, you should start seeing it come into the Bowden tube here very shortly. There it is. We have 30 millimeters left. We should start seeing extruding out the hot end in just a second. There comes the filament. And the Smart Load is complete. Filament is in place and ready to go. You can go ahead and hit the Start Print on Canvas and the printer will take off. Or you can hit the Start button on the pallet itself. Let's go ahead, hit Start. And the printer is off and running. Our first layer of orange is looking really good. Now it's working on the prime tower. So the first layer is finished on the white tower and the model, and everything is looking great. The gray is where it's supposed to be, the orange is where it's supposed to be, about 30% on the white tower. So let's let this thing complete and see how it looks when it's done. So the second print is done, and the silver and orange have definitely helped see what's going on with the model. Let's flip them over and have a look at the back. So the silver and orange filament have made this a ton easier to see. On the keychain, you can see that the silver isn't blended in the orange isn't blended in the silver, or vice versa. That's pretty much perfect. And on the white tower, you can see we got 30% orange, about 70% silver. That's exactly where you want it to be. It's pretty well calibrated. Back into the Canvas Hub, you can see our Palette 2 tab, our ping and pong stats. Pong is almost perfect, just a touch over 100%, but ping is at 98.39%. That's pretty much right on the money, especially at the end ping. And another handy feature of the newer plugins is you can hit this down arrow right here. It's going to download a text file with your ping stats. If you open that up, it's going to give you the stat for each ping. So at the beginning, the palette was actually a little bit ahead of the printer, providing a little bit too much filament. And at the end, it was dragging, trying to adjust a bit. But still, pretty close to perfect. That's going to get you a really nice print. And on the screen of the palette, it's going to ask you if you want to save this color calibration data. This was a pretty good run, so we're going to go ahead and hit save. Now, if it was a bad run, just ignore it and try again. That way it won't save these stats, so it won't learn off of them. But this is a good one, so we're going to hit save. And since we shortened that Bowden tube length, I wanted to remove this tube and show you. The slack on the end of this is much shorter now, so we're wasting a lot less filament, but we know we have enough to push it all the way to the hot end. The model that Mosaic recommends printing next is an earbud holder that uses all 4 colors. This is going to give you a lot better idea if you're getting your transitions correct. So let's head back to Thingiverse. And this is the print we want right here. Link in the description. Let's go ahead and download all these files. And we'll jump back into Canvas. We're going to start a new project. We're still on our Ender 3 with that fast profile. We're going to add models. Drop multi-material models here. We'll add all 4 pieces to that case. Now you'll notice it put it on its end. We need to put it on its flat side. So we'll select it, and we'll hit the ellipse right here, and we'll say lay face to bed. And we'll select this face. That should make it flat. Now we need to pick our colors. For this one, let's go with an orange, like we did before. We'll go with that gray color again. Let's go with a red. And our 4th one, let's make it yellow. So the earbud body, let's just leave that orange. Let's drag our silver or gray color, and let's make one of these sections silver. We'll take our red, we'll make one of the other sections red. And our yellow, we'll make the last section yellow. Now we'll use all 4 colors, and you see the wipe tower starting to get bigger. This test should tell us a lot more about how our calibration went. So that's all we need to do. Let's go ahead and slice. Our model's been created. Let's go ahead and send to Canvas Hub, send it to our test hub, and we'll head back to our Canvas Hub. Our model's being uploaded. The model has been added. We have it down here in our list. We're connected to the printer. Let's go ahead and make sure the palette 2 is connected up. Palette 2. We are connected. We should be good to start this print. So we'll go ahead and hit print. Palette 2 is going to initialize. Now we can go ahead and start loading in our filaments. Orange is on 1. Our gray or silver is on 2. Our red is on 3. And our yellow is on 4. We've got our outgoing tube plugged in. It's going to start making filament. Back to Canvas Hub, it tells us to go ahead and preheat, so we'll hit OK. Go ahead and preheat 215, 60. The first part of the filament's made, just like we did before. We're going to feed our filament into the extruder gears. We'll hit next. We'll put on our tube. Hit next. Now we have our Smart Load button. Back to Canvas Hub. We'll go ahead and hit Smart Load. Smart Load is complete. I love that feature. Let's go ahead, hit Start Print. Our print is underway. We'll come back when it's done and see how we did. Our first earbud holder is done, and it came out close, but not quite perfect. You can see down around these 3 top pieces, we had a few layers that weren't quite the right color. A few mismatched yellows and grays. So we're getting there, but not quite there yet. And on the palette side, you can see the print's complete, but the print wasn't perfect, so I'm going to go ahead and ignore this one. If we head back into the Canvas Hub, we can take a look at the stats. We're at 96% on pings. That's not so great. Let's download the sheet and take a look. You can see we kind of trailed off here. It got lower and lower. We actually missed a ping, which isn't good. So at the beginning of the calibration, all I'm going to do is rerun that same print. I'm not going to make any changes. We didn't save the last print, so hopefully it will learn by repeating the print. So let's just kick it off again. And here's my next try at the earbud holder. I did have to switch some filament around because I was running out of some of those colors, but this one came out a whole lot better. And if we go and take a look at the stats in Canvas Hub, these stats are much closer to what you want to see when you do your print. You can see it started out a little high, but then it balanced out around 99, even close to 100%. That's why it came out so good. There were a couple of 98s in there, but it managed to resolve it itself. So the print came out nice. So this one came out pretty nice, but if you're having problems with this model, don't hesitate to try something else. I went ahead and did one of these racing frogs as well. It came out pretty nice. It came out a little bit stringy, but the colors are accurate, and that's what we're going for here. If you're having problems dialing in your palette too, maybe the color transitions aren't happening at the right times, especially on a Bowden style setup, you want to make sure that your printer is operating accurately, especially when it comes to the extruder. Even if you skip just one step on the extruder motor, that's going to throw the pings on the palette 2 way off, and it's going to have a hard time compensating for that. So check your hot end, check your Bowden tube, check your extruder, make sure everything's operating accurately, and then move to your slicer and make sure everything is set correct over there. Let's have a look at my slicing profile. So back into Canvas, let's go to Printer Profiles. We'll take a look at our Ender 3 profile. We'll hit Edit, Edit Printer. So make sure in the Extruder tab here, make sure these are set correctly for the right size filament and for the nozzle diameter. And then we can check the slicer settings. We'll just hit Save here. We're using this fast setting. We'll click on that. We'll hit Edit. And you can go through all these settings, but there's a couple that I would check first. We'll go to Extrusion. Make sure your extrusion width is set correctly. I usually like to set it based on the nozzle size, so it'll be the same. I have a 0.4 nozzle, 0.4 extrusion width. You can bring it up some to widen the line out, but this is a good starting point. Make sure that's correct. Also, your retraction distance. On an Ender 3 or a Creality style machine, 6 is usually a pretty good number. Retraction speed, you can go ahead and lower this down to a 25 because that's what the stock firmware is set to. Now, if you flashed your firmware, you might want to change this up, but 25 would actually be the accurate number for stock firmware. Make sure your extrusion multiplier isn't any higher than 100%. And then in Infill, You might want to take a look at Infill print speed. Most of the time, the fastest print move is going to be during Infill, and 60 millimeters can be kind of quick for certain types of machines, so maybe consider lowering that a bit if you're having issues. And if you have a solid slicing profile that you know works with your printer already, you can import those. So if we go back up here to the menu, and we go to Printer Profiles, we can click on our printer, we'll hit Edit, and up here we can click New Style Profile. And then we'll hit Import from a different slicer. And I use Prusa Slicer, so we'll open that up. And I know my Ender 3 profile is pretty sound that I use in Prusa Slicer, so we'll just bring those settings into Canvas. So we'll go to File, Export, Config Bundle. It's going to save it as an INI file. We'll just save it on the desktop. Back to Canvas. We'll just click on the screen, go find our INI file on our desktop, and we'll open it. Then we can name it whatever we want. We'll just call it an Ender 3 PS for Prusa Slicer, and we can save it. Now I do highly recommend that you go through all your settings in here and make sure they imported correctly. Sometimes they don't get it quite right, but this is a good way to get back to a profile that you know already works. So let's hit save. So if you're having problems, definitely take a look at your slicer settings or bring a profile in from a different slicer that you know already works. Now we're done with the Ender 3, let's move on to the Prusa Mk3. The direct drive printers actually seem to be just a little bit easier to set up, so we'll walk through those steps as well. So back to our Canvas hub, we've got our Prusa Mk3 plugged in USB, our palette is still plugged in, the connection is good, we can make sure our palette 2 connection is good, and we're connected. So we'll go back to Canvas and get a print ready for our Mk3, and let's just start a new one. We'll do New Project, Add Models, and we're going to do that keychain again because we're on a brand new printer, so we have to start the calibration again, just with a different profile. So let's drop Multi-Material Models. We'll get the two pieces of the keychain, and this time I'm going to use purple and red. So we'll just change the second color, we'll drag the red over. Now we can change up our printer, we'll go over here to Settings. We're going to select the Prusa Mk3S that we created in the first video, and we'll just leave it with a standard profile. Again, it's always a good idea to come through here and take a look and make sure the settings are as expected. I always check extrusion, everything looks good here, so we should be alright for the Prusa printer. So let's hit save. It has updated our machine up here, so we're ready to slice. Again, I'm pretty comfortable with these filaments, so I'm just going to leave them default, but you can change these up if you want. So we'll hit slice, and it looks good, so let's go ahead and send it to Canvas Hub. We're using that same Canvas Hub that we set up for this tutorial. It has been sent back to Canvas Hub. Our new file's coming in, and here's the keychain for the Prusa printer. So we can go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and hit print. We'll let the palette start making some filament. The palette has noticed that we're using a new printer, so we'll go ahead and hit next to get it set up. Make sure the output is clear. We'll go ahead and hit finish because we know it is. And now we're going to load filament. We've got our purple loaded in one. We'll load our red in two. And the palette's going to start making filament. We can go ahead and hit next for now. And we'll wait a couple of minutes. So we're done making filament, but on the Mk3, since it does an auto load, we need to change a few things before we load our filament. So in the Prusa menu, we'll go down to Settings, and this filament auto load, we're going to turn that to off. That's so when we put the filament in there, it doesn't automatically try to extrude it. Now that we have that set, we can go ahead and put our tube on with our filament. On the Mk3 extruder, you should be able to just push the filament down to the opening of the Bondtech gears and then hook your tube on, and that should hold your filament in place for when you start to extrude. On the palette, we can go ahead and hit next. We've loaded our tube, we'll hit next. Now we need to jog the extruder down slowly until we start seeing the filament come out. And this time we'll use our Canvas hub, so let's go ahead and hit OK, and we can preheat. Once our hot end's up to temp, let's go to Control, and we can start extruding gradually. Let's do 5mm increments. We probably only need about 60 to 80 millimeters to load that hot end. So we'll hit Extrude. So I've loaded about 20 millimeters. I hit that 4 times. So now let's switch to 1mm. And we'll extrude until we see the red start coming out the hot end. Just go slow. You want to stop as soon as you see the red. I see just a bit of red filament coming out. You can see it better here. That should be where you need the filament to go. Now we can start our print. Back to the palette, we're done with that step. We can hit next. We'll hit save, and we'll hit start print. The printer's off and running. We'll check on it when the print completes. The top of the print looks okay. Let's check out the other side. And the other side looks pretty good. We're probably over 70% on that second color here, so we probably overshot just a little bit. Let's take a look at the pings. If you display all the pings, they're running around 95, 96%, somewhere in that neighborhood. So the palette wasn't actually keeping up with what the printer needed. But I think we can correct that with another run. So we're going to do the keychain one more time. So over on the palette 2, print is complete. Let's go ahead and hit finish. Back to canvas, we'll just go ahead and hit print on the keychain again. It's going to start making filament. We'll unplug our printer tube. We'll preheat. Now that we're preheated, we'll unload the old filament from the LCD screen. Let's go down to unload filament. We'll pull that out. Filament has been made. We'll go ahead and load the extruder once again. We'll hit next on the palette. We're clipped in, hit next. We can now use our smart load. We can also do that from canvas. Let's take a look in canvas. You can see we're going to load 60 millimeters. We'll just hit smart load. And we're ready to start the print. Let's go ahead and start. We're off and running again. We'll check out this print when it's done. So the second one looks pretty good. Let's check out the back. Back of the keychain looks good. Still a little bit over on the prime tower, but that might not be such a big deal. Let's go ahead and check out the pings. And from Canvas Hub, we can see all those pings are right around 100. That's a pretty good looking run right there. The stats on that print look pretty good, so we'll go ahead and hit save. So I'm pretty confident that the prints going forward are going to be correct. So now let's go ahead and try our earbud holder on our Prusa printer. So let's head back to Canvas. Again, we'll just start a new project. We've got purple, we've got red, we're going to use a black and a white. And we'll add models, drop multiple models, we'll grab all 4 pieces of our earbud holder. Again, we'll lay it flat. We'll go up to settings and we'll switch our printer out. We're still on the Ender 3. We're going to go to the Prusa Mk3S. Hit save. And then we can drag our colors. We'll just make this piece here red, this piece black, this piece white. And we should be good. Let's go ahead and slice. And let's send it to our Canvas Hub. Back to our hub. The file's been sent. It's right here. We'll go ahead and hit print and get our filament loaded. And we'll go ahead and preheat. Our purple and red are already loaded, so we'll load our black in number 3 and our white in number 4. Once again, while we're making filament, we'll remove this tube. Once the Hotends preheated, we're going to unload the filament from the LCD. Filament has been made. We'll load it back into the extruder and we'll hook our tube on. Back to the Canvas Hub. We're going to hit Smart Load. It's ready to go. We'll hit Start Print. Our printer's in action again. We'll check and see what it looks like when it's done. Our print is done. It looks like we did pretty well. Let's check it out. This is pretty much flawless. No missed layers at all. Looks really good. Let's check out the pings. And the pings are right on. Most of these are hundreds. There's a few 99s. But this is almost perfect. So that's it for the Prusa Mk3. The direct drive extruder is just a lot easier to set up. Plus you don't have to wait for that longer load time of that Bowden tube. If there's one tip that I could give anybody setting up their palette to, that is make sure your 3D printer is super consistent before you even try. That way you're going to be able to nail those color transitions first time out and you're not going to be near as frustrated. Now there's only one more thing I want to go over about the palette too, and that's how it does filament transitions. So we're going to take a look at this model here. This model I did a while back on the Ender 3, but you can see there's a little bit of issue when it did some transitioning in between the eyes right here in this band. Also you can see some on the back of the silver. There's a little bit of yellow back here. You can adjust that inside Canvas. We can take a look at that same project. Now Canvas tries to decide what color you're using and where you're going to transition and make those transitions as long or as short as they need to be. So say we're transitioning from black to yellow, it's going to make that transition a lot longer to try to get a more true yellow color. But if we're transitioning from yellow to black, it's going to be a lot shorter transition because that black will cover up the yellow. You don't have to worry about the bleeding so much. It does a pretty nice job doing this automatically on most models, but you can see there can be issues like the model I just showed you. With the newer releases of Canvas, you have more options on adjusting these transitions than you did before. If we head over here to Settings, and we go down to Transition, this will give you your default transition length. Also note that you can kick on using Infill for transitioning. This is going to affect your model a little bit, but it should reduce the size of your transition tower quite a bit. It's only going to work on specific STL files, but do give it a try. But the main setting I wanted to show you was variable transition length. Again, we have our default 130mm transition up here, and that's right here in the middle, but I think the weak and strong transition settings are easier to see if you kick on the advanced configuration options up here. Over here on the left you have outgoing filament. On top here you have ingoing filament. So say I was working on black and I wanted to transition to yellow right here. This would be the length of the transition, this number in this area, that it would do to make that yellow more clear. So if the black was bleeding into the yellow, I'd raise this number. And when I'm coming from a yellow color, right here on line 3, going to black, I could reduce this number quite a bit because it's black filament and it's going to cover it up. So that would save you some filament. So if you're having transition problems like I was showing you, definitely come in here and try out these new features. So that brings us to the end of our two-part video series on setting up and printing in multicolor on a Palette 2. Now I did struggle quite a bit setting up my Palette 2, but with the more recent firmware upgrades, the updates to Canvas, as well as Mosaic manufacturing support, I can get consistent prints pretty much every time now. So if you're struggling with your Palette 2, definitely don't be afraid to reach out to Mosaic support. It is top-notch. Hopefully you liked this video and you found it helpful. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. If not, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.